right? Yep. Okay. I think most everything is up and going. Okay. James, you may need to turn your microphone off to mute yourself.
I thought I was on mute already.
No problem. All right, let's see. And we're still missing several people. All right, so we're going to wait another minute or so here. Okay, as you're joining, you have a couple of different options. One is, obviously, you can view what I had shared with you in terms of the shared screen, which is the syllabus. Everybody see that? Can I raise your hand? Yes? Okay, perfect. All right, but what I've also done is I've set up a couple of other cameras in the room so that if you get tired of looking at, in essence, the shared screen of the whatever I have up there, there is another screen that is simply, well, two, both have Fred Forgy as the name on them. One, you can see where I'm standing over next to the basically a big screen, and what I've got on that, you can't really see it on your screen, but in essence, I've got all of your pictures shown up here, so that this way, whenever obviously I'm talking and you're talking, I can see you and hopefully you can see me, so I'm not just obviously talking to an empty room, okay? Does everybody understand? Yes? Nod your heads up and down. See, I can actually see that. All right, that's perfect. Just like you're here with me. All right, now, let's see. Now, also, the other screen that I've got set up, or the other camera, is so if you just kind of want to take a view of me while obviously I'm talking up here behind the lectern and potentially then pointing at the screen, you can have that up as well. Now, another thing that you may figure out fairly quickly is on the images that you may have of other people in the class, you have the option of expanding that out throughout the whole screen so that you can just watch the faces, you can watch what's on the screen. So you've got a lot of different choices to toggle between, okay? So hopefully, you know, I do not want to make it more confusing than what it needs to be, but at this, you know, point, with this kind of weirdness of kind of technology and interface, I wanted to give you a few different options. Another thing that is happening that you don't see is I have another regular video camera in the room that's recording the lecture as well. So in the event, for whatever reason, the Zoom recording doesn't show up well, the other camera will be recording and I'll be posting that to YouTube and give you a link for that you can download. Okay, everybody understand? Kind of raise your hand, sort of wave around. Okay, once again, I can see you doing that. That's a good thing. Those of you with your cameras off, I would appreciate if you would turn them on because it's a way for me to kind of get a sense of you're engaged and you're here, okay? All right, so with all of that, any questions before we get started? Because I want to just check the audio in the room to make sure everything is okay. So anybody want to just do a quick little shout out?
Good audio.
Okay, perfect. I can hear you extremely well.
I have a question.
Okay, question?
Yeah, so I know you hand out handouts. So how are we going to get the handouts? You're going to upload them on Zoom?
I actually send them via email.
Okay, so you sending it via email?
Yep, this morning about 5 o'clock.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, and just so you know, just actually for future reference for all of you, obviously I'm a morning person. So it's not atypical for me to be at the office by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, okay? So if you want to get quick response from me, that's usually the best time of the day to be texting me, calling me, emailing me, that sort of thing. You know, late at night, I'm the kind of guy, I'm in bed by probably 6, 7 o'clock at night, okay? So anything after that, I probably won't see until the following morning, all right? Now, with that, let's go ahead and try to see if we can get started and see if the technology will do what I'm wanting it to do. And I've got to say, this is one of the weirdest experiences of my 31 years of teaching, of basically teaching to an empty room, staring at basically a big Brady Bunch sort of looking screen. So we'll see how this is going to go. But once again, if you do have questions, obviously as I'm kind of going through things, just stop me. You know, potentially you should be able to wave at me. Also, the chat function should pop up on my big Brady Bunch screen as well, so that I should be able to see if you've got a question about something. So as we kind of go through this, obviously we'll try to work out some of the bugs and sort of see where we go from there. Okay, so the first thing, let me just see if this works. Oops. All right. So in terms of writing on the screen, all right, this is interesting. All right. Okay, so let's just start with the syllabus here. All right, I sent this to you via email. It's obviously been on Canvas for a couple of weeks now. Not anything, you know, too terribly strange, but we'll kind of go through little by little here as quickly as we can. So the first thing in terms of the course, obviously the real estate finance course, we are obviously our first day of class. In terms of me and my office hours, obviously you've got my contact information here. In terms of this is actually my cell phone, the 258-3630, so you can get a hold of me pretty much anytime via regular call or text. And then my office hours, typically Monday through Friday, 9 to around noon, here in the DeSantis building, room 2090, okay? And then also obviously available via Zoom. Now as you see, our class starting next week, we'll meet here in this room, DeSantis room 3030. Just out of curiosity, I'm just once again kind of looking at the headshots over here. How many of you will be attending in person? Just give me a raise of hands. Okay, so a fair number of you. All right, good. All right. Now once again, it's not required that you attend in person, okay? Now technically, this is supposed to be a synchronous course, meaning you are technically supposed to show up here online via Zoom by 8 o'clock in the morning every Saturday. Now, in the event, for whatever reason, you're unable to show up, then you are welcome to obviously watch the videos and prepare yourself for the quizzes, as I'm going to talk about here in a couple of minutes. But there's a deadline for all of you, including people who don't view the videos while we're actually going through class. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Okay, so in short, what is this course all about? It is pretty much everything about sort of the lender's perspective as it relates to real estate finance. So most everything we're going to be talking about is looking at it from the lender's perspective in this course. Whereas the second half of the semester, the real estate investments course, is looking at everything from the borrower's perspective or the investor's perspective. All right? Now, with this course and with the next course, the investments course, and also the financial modeling course that will be coming up next semester, we share the same book. You only have to buy one book for 3 classes. All right? Now, hopefully most of you paid attention to what I sent out via one of the emails, which is you can buy the book directly from the publisher, Linneman & Associates, and you can buy it off of their website for, I think, $170 all in. Is that correct? Yes?
164.
What, sorry?
164 including shipping.
Okay, 164, so even less. All right. So my suspicion is that's considerably less than what you can get it from the bookstore or from Amazon for. But make sure that you obviously have it and you're prepared to go with that. But once again, that's going to be for this class, for the investments class, and for the financial modeling class. All right, everybody clear on that? Yep. Thumbs up, something? Okay, there we go. Okay, let's see here. All right, so kind of the way that this thing is going to operate, basically every week we are going to cover typically about a chapter's worth of material. And then after we cover that material, then we'll have a quiz, okay? And that quiz will be focused on the reading assigned, the lecture, and then whatever discussion that we have in class, potentially, okay? So each quiz will typically be 10 questions. Most of the quizzes for this class and for the investments class are computations, okay? So there's not a lot of words. I mean, yes, we obviously use words, but in terms of what you're going to be tested on are really the concepts in terms of applying these financial concepts, okay? Doing calculations of all different manner. And to me, that's always been the best way for people to really absorb the material, is that you kind of get away from trying to memorize a bunch of definitions and a bunch of concepts, and instead focus your attention on really what do those concepts mean, how do I use them, how do I apply them, and ultimately be a very practical sort of experience for you as you kind of go through and are beginning to understand how all this stuff sort of fits together. Does that make sense? Okay, now in terms of the quizzes, as I said, well, I put this in an email announcement as well, or I think an announcement on Canvas, that basically what we'll do is we will chat today until about 11:15. Once we're done with that, Canvas will automatically open up the quiz for today. You are not required to start the quiz at 11:15. If you choose to start the quiz at 11:15, then you've got 45 minutes to complete it until noon, and then ultimately it gets graded and obviously you'll get the result. You have the option of waiting until Monday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. to start the quiz and then be done by 11:45. Does that make sense? Okay, but once you start the quiz, you can't stop it, okay? So, you get in, you do question number 1, and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. You can't stop it, you're stuck. You've got to continue, okay? So, is everybody comfortable and understand that? Yes? All right, cool. Now, as you can see, in terms of the schedule, we've got 8 weeks and pretty much about 8 chapters worth of material, and you can kind of get a general sense for what each week is going to bring in terms of topics and discussion, that sort of thing. Now, in terms of the way that your grades will work in this class, which obviously many people, that's one of their primary concerns, is looking here at the syllabus. There are a total of 8 quizzes, obviously 1 each week, each worth 12.5 points or 12.5%, totaling up to 100 possible points, okay? So you can be done by taking these 8 quizzes, you're done, you got your grade, you're out of here, okay? But if for whatever reason you don't complete a quiz, you get a 0 for that quiz. In other words, by 11 o'clock on Monday night, if you haven't started that quiz and have it done by 11:45, you're not going to get credit for it, you're going to get a 0. Is everybody clear with that? Yes or no? And there's no retakes, no repeats, whatever. All right? Now, what there will be, for example, if you're not happy with your quiz scores, your quiz average, if it will, you'll have one chance to take a comprehensive final exam, okay? And that comprehensive exam will be at the end of the semester, or October the 10th, or sometime during the week of October the 10th, and it will replace all the grades from those 8 quizzes, okay? Now, is the comprehensive final a gut buster? Well, to a certain extent it is, because it's all 8 quizzes, in essence, taking them all at once. Does that make sense? Okay? Now that is sort of what I would call the nuclear option in the sense that you really have screwed up through the semester. That's your sort of one chance to sort of redeem yourself. Now here's the difference though. The quizzes are open book, open notes, and open computer, open calculator, but not obviously open neighbor, okay? So obviously you guys are in no way, shape, form, or fashion to work together in any way whatsoever on the quizzes. Everybody clear with that, yes or no? Okay? And the comprehensive final, the big difference is it will be closed book, closed notes, closed computer, and we will figure out a way to administer it in person at a testing center, okay? So that's the way that we will ensure that you are only coming in with your brain and your calculator, okay? Does that make sense? All right. Okay, and is that a question or is that a cough?
I have a question.
Okay.
All right, after class, we have until Monday to take the exam. Are you gonna make the Zoom recordings and everything available right after class?
The Zoom recording should be available within an hour or so after class.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Yep. Max?
The final exam, can we, let's say we're perfectly satisfied with our quiz grades, can we take the final exam for fun to reimburse the course's lessons?
I suppose if you want to be an overachiever, sure.
I'm just asking.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? All right. Moving on. Obviously, you guys were familiar with how kind of the grading thing works. What else? Okay, I think that's pretty much it for the syllabus. All right, let's move on to a nice little example here. Okay. So this morning, bright and early for you, mid-morning for me, I sent you guys an email with basically this little sort of sample, sort of simple questions or simple examples of a commercial real estate property valuation. And so what we're going to do, I sent it out this morning and just simply said, okay, feel welcome to take a stab at this on your own. But what we're going to do is kind of work through this together. Now the purpose of this exercise is just to get you sort of mildly involved in terms of what this is all about, okay? This is a super simple example. Things will only get more complicated from here, okay? And the complication level sort of escalates as we move through this material, all right? So I guess what I'm saying is, don't necessarily get overconfident, okay? That let's say that you do really well on quiz 1 and you get 100, you're like, woohoo! You know, I'm done, okay? This is super easy. Don't get overconfident. Realize each quiz will probably get successively successively more and more challenging, okay? As we get deeper and deeper into some of this material. Okay, everybody comfortable or understand? Okay, good. All right. So let's see if the first little bit of technology here will kind of work with us. And all right. So let's take a look. Okay, question. Claudia, I think you're muted. There we go.
Oh yeah, there was some trouble. I'm trying to find where I can print out also what you're showing now, and also like this handout.
Right, yeah, I sent to you via email this morning. About 5 something this morning. 5, 6 o'clock this morning.
Like it should be in that inbox.
Well, it should be in your Nova student email. Not necessarily in Canvas, just in your Nova email.
Okay.
Yeah, I had found that the Canvas email system is sometimes unreliable, so I much rather send and receive things through the normal Nova email accounts. Okay? Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So.
Quick question.
Yep.
So the printout is on 1 page, 4 questions, correct?
I'm sorry?
What you sent us was 1 page, 4 questions.
That is correct.
All right.
Okay. All right. So in this case, just going to read through this with me. Assume that you recently inherited $300,000. You want to invest this in an income-producing commercial real estate investment. Okay. So there's the setup. All right. Now, assume that local commercial real estate lenders are typically loaning up to 80% debt of an income-producing property's valuation, or an 80% loan-to-value ratio, as we'll be talking about a little bit later in the class. All right? That means that your equity investment would represent 20% of the valuation. Okay? So 80% debt, 20% equity. So what would be the maximum amount that you could pay for your investment property? And then in other words, how much would that mean you could borrow in this scenario? Okay? So let's sort of take a look at this first piece of this question. The maximum amount that you could pay for your investment property. So if things are 20% debt, 20% equity, appears to be a little bit of a lag on this, so this is going to be kind of interesting. All right, 80% debt. Wow, that is a lag. Okay, so your equity, the maximum equity that you've got is $300,000. Okay, so in order to sort of find out what the total value of this would be, you could take that $300,000, divide it by 20%. Okay, so let's do that real quick. 300,000 divided by 0.2. So 1,500,000. Okay, so what does that 1,500,000 mean? What is that number? What does that represent?
Total purchase price.
Okay, it means that's our total purchase price. That's the maximum value that we could pay for the property. Now, what does that mean that we could actually borrow? Okay, so in this case, that's not how much we can borrow, that's how much we can basically spend on the property. How much we can borrow is going to be that number minus 300,000, or what?
Forfeit.
1.2.
1.2. So in other words, our debt is going to be 1,200,000. Does everybody understand that? Yes or no? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I mean, another way of getting at that 1,200,000 would also be to take the 1.5 million, multiply it by 80%, and then that would also give you 1.2 million as well. Okay? Everybody good? Okay. Excellent. So, to answer this first question, the maximum amount that you could pay, what is the answer?
1.5.
1.5 million. Okay? Whereas the second question, how much could you borrow? The answer would be
1.2.
1.2. Okay? All right. Moving forward. Okay, so now we kind of have established what we can borrow, what the maximum purchase price would be for us. And so we've gone out, we started looking, we found this little commercial property, a little apartment community. It's got 10 units. All are one-bedroom efficiencies. They're all leasing at $1,000 a month for a total potential gross income of $12,000 per unit per year, or $120,000 total. Does everybody understand that? Because you've got 10 units, each earning $1,000 a month. So the total, so in other words, we kind of go over here, we do the math just to make sure that you're following. $1,000 a month times 12 months is going to give us $12,000. And then we have a total of 10 units. That's going to give us $120,000 total of potential gross income. Okay? Now, let's sort of stop here for just a second. This term that we use, PGI, potential gross income. The simple way to sort of think about this is the maximum revenue the property can generate from its rental income. Does that make sense? Now they can still have other forms of income, like, and which we'll talk about here in a minute, but this is basically the rental income that the property can generate off of the units that it has available for lease. Okay? Everybody cool? Yes? All right. Now, and in this format that I provided you here, potential gross income minus VCL or vacancies and collection losses plus other income equals EGI or effective gross income minus total operating expenses equals NOI or net operating expenses. That is something you absolutely need to commit to memory, not just for your quiz, but this is something as any sort of investment analyst for real estate, that's just something intuitively that you've got to sort of think about and be able to sort of process that information very quickly to come up with the sort of bottom line number of net operating income, because that number is kind of the key that tends to open up a lot of investment valuation, okay? Now once again, this is a simplified model and we're gonna make it a little bit more complex later, but right now let's just kind of focus on the concepts. All right, so in this case, we assume, this is, I guess is really the second sentence here, we assume that over a typical year, there is a 10% vacancy and collection loss for this complex. Okay, so VCL, vacancy and collection loss, what does that actually mean? Well, a vacancy is obviously whenever you have a unit that is sitting empty, okay, that makes sense. Whereas a collection loss is the unit may be occupied, but for whatever reason, they're not paying the rent, okay? Whether they're not able to pay the rent, whether they choose not to pay the rent, whatever the issues are, it's a collection loss, okay? All right, so in this case, if there's a 10% vacancy and collection loss, that 10% is going to be of the PGI. So in this case, that's going to equate to $12,000. All right, everybody good with that? Okay? All right, now we jump on down to other income, OI. All right, so in this case, we assume that the property generates $1,000 per year in other income from vending machines, laundry machines, etc. All right, now those are just a few examples, but you know, I'm sure any of you that have ever lived in apartment communities, you know there's a ton of things that they can generate other revenue from. These are just a couple of examples, okay? Also parking fees, like if you have covered parking or maybe garage parking or something like that, there'll yet be another fee that could be charged here. Okay, but $1,000 a year, okay, so that is simply going to be added here. All right, then we're going to do the math, okay? So we're going to start out with 120,000, subtract out 12,000, and then add in 1,000. That's going to give us effective gross income of 133,000. Okay? Is everybody clear what we did? Okay, once again, 8th grade math, okay? Really simple stuff. All right? Now, once we've got, hello?
Yeah, it's Adam.
Yep.
Were we subtracting the vacancy from the PGI?
Yes. Yes.
It's 109, sir.
Yeah,
What?
109, not 133. You added the 12.
Whoops, my bad.
Basic math.
I was just say 8th grade math.
It is.
My math is so off right now.
Ugh. Too many different things going on. All right, try that again. 120 minus 12 plus 1,000. All right, just checking to make sure if you're honest. All right. 109,000 is our effective gross income. So that 109,000 is basically saying this is the dollar amount that we're actually bringing in the door from this property, all right? And so this is the dollar amount that we then have available to us to begin to pay for operating expenses. So in this case, our operating expenses is going to be basically 35% of our effective gross income. All right, so in this case, our effective gross income of 109,000, if we multiply that by 35%,
38,150.
38,150,
50, yeah, okay.
okay, all right, and then we're going to subtract that then from our 109,000 EGI, and we should end up with 70,000
850.
850.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we got through that. All right, now moving forward. Okay, so this NOI, just to sort of point out here, this is the dollar amount that after we have paid our expenses, if we had paid cash for the property, this would be the amount that we would put in our back pocket, okay? But we obviously have some debt, and we'll deal with that maybe a little bit later, but right now, we're just focused on the cash flow this property is generating. So this 70,850 is the dollar amount that is being generated by the property on an annual basis. So what we begin to do now is we apply a cap rate to this to come up with a value indication for the property. All right? Now, some of you, would probably want to ask the question, okay, what is a cap rate? Okay? The cap rate or capitalization rate is basically that rate of interest or rate of return that will attract capital to a particular investment, okay? So in this particular case, now this is not the interest rate, okay, that you're getting charged on a loan, that's separate. This is simply saying that for this type of investment, in this particular market, this would be the rate of return that would be expected for this type of asset. Now, you're going to say, well, 5% seems really low, and so forth, so on. Well, we're going to get into something a little bit later that will make this a little bit clearer when we have sort of a blended rate of your equity and your debt. And if your cost of debt is super cheap, married with a relatively high return you're going to give yourself in a return on equity, that blended rate ultimately sort of becomes a cap rate. Okay, and we'll talk more about that later. Don't worry about that right now. Okay, so assume the standard cap rate is 5%. Calculate or the implied value of this property. All right, so what you're going to do is simply take that annual NOI of 70,850, and if we were to put in the cap rate over here of 0.05, all right, and you could do the backwards math and come up with the implied value that way, or this formula, just for purposes of explanation, is what I typically refer to as ERV.
That's right.
Okay? And so what you've got in this particular case is your income of the 70,850 you've got your rate of return or cap rate of 5%, and then that means your value you're going to be solving for, okay, which is actually going to be using this version of the formula, which is taking that annual NOI of $70,850 divided by 0.05, okay, which should give you 1,417,000. Okay? Is everybody good with that? Now, the reason why I've got these other two formulas is it depends on what you're given, okay, as to what you're solving for. All right, so we kind of go down here and we put back in what we were given. We're given the cap rate on this example. We were given the annual NOI. All right, so in each case, what we're sort of missing is the implied value, okay? But what if we were given the implied value? Well, then that's where, within this, you would sort of change things up a little bit, okay? Like, for example, so does everybody understand that piece of it? Yes? Okay, so let's just say, as an alternative example, here for a second, that we didn't have the income, okay? So we sort of scratched through the income. Matter of fact, I'm just going to kind of erase all of these. All right, as I'm erasing these. Okay. Here, where's this? All right, so let's say that instead of having the income, what we have is maybe the overall value of the property. So let's just say that the overall value of the property is $1 million. Okay? So and you're saying, well, how do we get that? Well, that may be what, let's say, the property sold for. So if the property were to have sold for $1 million, and in this market, this type of property is meant to generate about a 5% cap rate, then what that would mean is, in terms of doing the math, you're simply going to take that 1 million times 5%, and you would end up with 50,000 as, in essence, the income that it would need to generate to satisfy that value. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now, this is where, you know, in person, this would be a little bit easier to show than obviously kind of doing it this way, but in essence, I'm going to try to explain the simple way of viewing this. So you've got that little ERV diagram there, all right? So whatever it is that you want to solve for in the ERV diagram, put your thumb over it, okay? So in the event that you're wanting to solve for the income, if you were to put your thumb over the income, now you can't see me doing that, but if you were to put your thumb, then what you've got is rate times value. Does everybody see that? Okay, now if you're wanting to solve for the cap rate, put your finger over that. And in essence, then it becomes income divided by value. Okay, if you want to solve for the value, income divided by the rate. Okay, that's where these three different inverted sort of formulas come from over here on the left-hand side of the handout. Depending on the items that you have, you solve for the missing third. Does that make sense? Okay? All right, moving forward. Okay, so the last little question, assume that this property is priced by the seller at $1.3 million. Okay, should you potentially purchase the property? Why or why not? Okay, well, what did we say the value originally was? We said the original value, based upon the information that we had, not this revised version, but the original, we said the value of the property was what?
1.5.
1 million, what? No, not the value. We're talking about the implied value based on the cap rate. What was it, 1.4?
147.
Okay, 1,470,000. So what we're saying is that is, in essence, what we believe to be the market value. Okay?
Dr. Forgy.
Yep.
It's 1,417,000.
Okay, I heard her saying 70. I'm sorry. Because I don't have it written down here, obviously. Okay. All right. So 1,417,000 would be the implied value. So that's what we're saying the property is worth, assuming the annual net operating income that it's generating and assuming the cap rate that we were given. Okay, so this fourth question, whenever it says, assume this property is priced by the seller at 1.3, should we purchase the property, why or why not? So basically what is happening in this particular dynamic, just in case it's not making sense, is we're the buyer, we have done our very basic investment analysis on this property, independent of whatever the seller may be, doing or not doing, and we have said this property is worth $1,417,000 to us. Does that make sense? So the fact that the seller is selling it at 1.3 million, then from our perspective, that's a good thing. That means that we can buy this property and rest reasonably assured that we've made a pretty good investment based upon our criteria. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And kind of the why or why not is just simply because we determined the implied value to be 1.4 million, they are willing to sell it at 1.3 million. So, in essence, a $117,000 difference in value in our favor, that works. Okay? Good? Okay. All right. Now, let's see if I can now go to the whiteboard.
Yeah, quick question. When the banks are looking at giving you that loan, do they look at that 1.417 for the loan value ratio and how much they'll give you, or do they look at the selling price?
For the most part, they're going to require you to, once again, submit your own analyses on the property based upon a couple of different things. One, they're going to look historically at what this property has been generating in rents. And this is getting a little bit more complex that we're going to get into a little bit later, but they're going to look at the historic sort of rents of the property. They're going to look at what you anticipate the rents being once you purchase the property, what sort of capital investment that you may be making in the property in terms of repairs, maintenance, changes to the property, that sort of thing. And then once you sort of prepared that package along with an independent market appraisal, which should take into account all of that, the lender is pretty much going to make their decision as to what the overall value of the property is for the purpose of making a loan. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And it's going to get a lot more complex as you're going to sort of see as we get into this. Okay. Now, okay, so with that quick little sort of introduction, let's kind of try to see if we can kind of go through now and begin to use some of the functionality of a financial calculator. Okay? One of the questions that I often get, asked is, okay, well, why do you use a financial calculator? Why don't you just use Excel and that sort of thing? Well, part of the reason is that using the financial calculator is going to get you much closer to understanding the concepts, okay, of understanding the calculation itself. Whenever you start using Excel, you end up just popping in numbers and getting a result, from some pre-embedded formula that you have no idea what you've done, okay? It's just a big black box, okay? Punch in a number here, get output there, done, okay? With a financial calculator, it forces you to look at each independent variable and kind of say, okay, what is the variable that I need to use here? Why do I need to use it? What is the logic to get me from sort of where I am now to ultimately being able to solve the problem. And speaking from years of, this is like my 31st year, 32nd year of teaching and using basically a financial calculator, to do this, folks, I think just do much better learning it initially on a financial calculator, and then making the transition to Excel becomes that much easier because then you actually understand what it is you're doing, okay? Does that make sense? All right, so with the HP 10B calculator, which hopefully all of you have, if you don't have one for whatever reason, there is an app available on the iTunes, or not iTunes, the App Store, that you can download one. Although I wouldn't trust it completely, I use it on occasion, but with more complex problems, sometimes it gets a little wonky. But nonetheless, hopefully you have your HP 10B, and what we will do is kind of walk you through, number one, how to use the calculator. Now, if you're already familiar with how to use it, you can kind of tune out a little bit, but realize that it's going to be absolutely fundamental that you really are comfortable using this calculator and being able to work through and solve the problems that you're going to be given. Okay, so let's just sort of start out and kind of walk you through a few basics whenever you're using the calculator. All right, so one of the first things that we need to do is deal with the issue of compounding. Okay, or number of payments per year. Okay, for our purposes. Now, in real estate, 99% of the calculations that in most real estate transactions are going to be one of two different compounding periods. Things are either going to be done on an annual basis or they're going to be done on a monthly basis, okay? In other words, you're going to have monthly mortgage payments. But yet those monthly mortgage payments roll up into an annual payment or annual income in terms of rents, okay? There are many other compounding periods. As a matter of fact, you can get compounding that happens twice a year for a lot of bonds that are out there available to purchase. You can get quarterly compounding on savings accounts and a variety of other things. You can get daily compounding on certain types of investments that you may do. But for the purposes of real estate and most of our calculations, it's either going to be one payment per year, which is annual, or 12 payments per year, which is monthly, okay? Now, one of the things that you're going to sort of pick up on as we start working through problems is that in many cases we'll kind of go back and forth between whether we're talking about an annual number or we're talking about a monthly number. So just like, and that's one of the reasons I like to start out with that little example that we did here at the beginning of class, is because it's a little bit of a mix of both, okay? You have the situation of where you're given monthly rents on the property that then roll up into an annual number, okay? Or you're given the amount of operating expenses, which is an annual number. You're given the other income, which is also given to you as an annual number. But yet your rents are still monthly, okay? So everybody kind of understand that. Now it seems really basic, but what you're going to find is one of the traps that's going to sort of capture you in some cases will be making sure that you're paying attention of whether you're dealing with annual numbers or monthly numbers, okay? So you've always got to be paying attention to in essence, what's sort of being given, all right? Now, once you've basically realized, now in terms of the, well, okay, in terms of the calculator, in setting this, what you're going to do, first of all, anytime that you see me draw a little sort of black box that's kind of filled in, that is the shift key on the HP10B. And the shift key on the HP10B2 is that orangish looking key on the bottom, sort of, it's 3 keys from the bottom on the left-hand side. That is the shift key, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to hit that shift key, and then I want you to hit clear all, which is above, basically, or below in this case, the clear key. When you do that, when you hit the shift key and the clear key, something should briefly pop up in the display. Okay? What should pop up in the display is how many compounding periods your calculator is currently set for. So just out of curiosity, whenever you do that, you hit the shift and then you hit the clear key right below that. It should pop up 12p year, 1p year, or something else, okay? How many of you, just out of curiosity, raise your hand? It popped up 12p year. Excellent. How many of you popped up 1p year? Okay, so what that means is some of you have your calculators currently set for 12 payments per year. Others of you, it's currently set for 1 payment per year. Okay? So a question just came in, it looks like, about the shift key. Once again, the shift key is that orange-ish key that's on the left-hand side of the calculator, 3 keys up, right above the clear key. Okay? All right. Now, to set the calculator to a different or to confirm a particular number of payments per year, what you're going to do is you're just simply going to say, all right, what if I put in 1 shift, and then you go up on the top row of the calculator, the payment key, but what you're actually accessing is the payments per year, okay? Whenever you do that, whenever you type in 1 shift payment per year, that will convert the calculator now to annual payments, okay? So if you now go back and you hit the shift and the clear all key, it should say 1p year in the display. Does it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now if we want to do 12 payments per year, same process, except you're going to type in 12 shift payments per year. And when you do that, now if you hit the shift and the clear key, it should show up 12p year. Okay? Is everybody good? So that's the reason I start with that. Before you answer any problem, before you do any computation, the very, very first thing you should do is try to determine whether that particular problem is using monthly information or it's using annual information. Because if you get that wrong, that will throw off everything. Okay, and you'll see what I mean here in a couple of minutes with a couple of examples. Okay, all right, so let's just start. Hopefully all of you now, your calculator is set to 12 payments per year, because that's the most recent thing we just did. Now, another thing to point out about this calculator is it keeps stuff in its memory. So for example, if you turn off the calculator and you put it in a box and you leave it in a box for a year, you turn it back on a year later, it's still going to be set for 12 payments per year. Okay? Now I know that seems super basic, and I can tell some of you are like, oh my God. But the point is, you need to understand, you've got to make sure that you pay attention to this whenever you're starting these calculations. Okay, so let's just do a very basic sort of mortgage calculation. All right, so we're going to go over here, and the first step of the process, which we've already done, is to set the calculator up to 12 payments per year. All right, and the calculation we're going to do is a basic mortgage calculation. So what we're going to say is that we've gotten a loan amount equal to $100,000. We have an interest rate on that loan of 10%, and we have a term on the loan of 30 years with monthly payments. Okay, so those are the details of the loan. All right, so all you're going to do to set this up on the calculator, you're going to type in 12 payments per year. Then to double check that it's set correctly, you're going to hit the shift and the clear all, and whenever you do that, then it should say, yeah, 12 payments per year, you're good to go. Then you're going to type in 100,000, and you're going to hit the PV button, present value. We're going to talk about that here in a second, but right now, just type it in, hit the PV button. Then you're going to hit 10%, and so you're going to hit 10, and then on the top row of the calculator, the interest rate key, interest per year, 10%. Then you're going to type in 30, and you're going to hit the shift key. Then you're going to hit N. Whenever you do that, it should pop up in your display 360. And the reason it's popping up 360 is it's saying, oh, 30 years times 12 payments per year, or 360 months. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Can you repeat that last up?
Okay. So once again, you're going to put in the 100,000 as your present value, the loan amount. You're going to put in 10% as your interest rate. Then you're going to type in 30, and you're going to hit the shift key. And what that shift is doing is it's saying, take note of the number of payments per year that we have, okay? And so it's going to multiply the 30 times 12, which is going to give you 360 total payments, okay? All right, then to solve for the answer, which is the payment, you're simply going to hit the payment key. And whenever you do that, you should get 877.57. But let's just make sure. Yep. And it's going to show up as a negative number, which we're going to talk about here in a second. All right, so rounded to the nearest penny, you should get 877.57. Okay, is everybody matching with that? Yes? Anybody not matching with that? If you're not, we need to work through it real quick because you're going to get lost really quick. Okay, so what are you getting?
Well, to me, I think I'm having an issue when it comes to entering the years. I put 30 and then I put the shift button, but when I press payment after, it just comes out to 30.
No, okay. After you hit the shift key, you have to hit N.
Which one's in?
It's top row of the calculator, far left.
I see. That was my issue.
Okay? So all those functions, PV, interest rate, term, and payment, all are located along the top row of the calculator. Okay? Those are what we call the time value of money functions. Okay? Now the others of you that didn't get it the first time, are you getting it now? Okay, Deborah, you're on mute.
Can you go through the steps just one more time?
Okay. All right, so once again, at the very beginning, you do 12 shift payment, okay? Once you've done that, then you hit the shift and the clear all in order to see that it's currently set up appropriately for 12 payments per year. Then you put in the loan amount of the 100,000, press the payment, or I'm sorry, press the present value key, okay, which simply is telling the calculator, this is our loan amount. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, but right now we're just trying to make sure you're getting the functionality of the calculator. So,
Right.
so 100,000, press the present value key. Once you've done that, then you type in 10, hit the interest rate key, the one on the top row says I divided by year. Then you're going to type in 30 for 30 years. You're going to hit the shift key. Then you're going to hit N, which is the number of periods. It's going to give back to you in the display 360, which is simply the total number of months or the number of payments that are being made. And then you're going to solve for the payment. By just hitting the payment key, then it will give you back in your display negative 877.57 and some change. Now, here's another thing to sort of point out here. It gives you, 877.57. Now, how many of you, if any, is it rounding off to like the nearest penny? Any of you?
Mine says 870.32.
No. You must have, okay, is there, in the display of your calculator,
Right.
are there any words?
VEG.
That's why. Okay, hit the shift key, and then on the right-hand side of the calculator, underneath the MAR margin key, is begin end mode. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Just hit that, hit the shift, and then begin end, and then that should take the word begin out of your display.
Okay, it
And
did.
now, go back, hit the payment key again.
Yes.
Okay, what that was doing, and we're going to talk about this, is that was making your calculator was making the assumption the payment was being made at the beginning of the month as opposed to the end of the month. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, okay? All right, somebody else had a comment, I think they got like 277 or something. Who was that?
It was in the chat.
Okay, oh, that was from the end. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Where is Ann? Do I see her on here? I guess she might be on the next screen. Oh, Ann. Okay, you got 277. All right. So Ann, let me try to see if I can figure out what you did. You get 277. Try this another way. And I don't know what you did. I'm trying to figure out if I can figure out a way to get what you did.
I had 277, but I realized I hit the payment for my 10. After 10 years, I hit the payment button instead of the year.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So you had hit the okay. What you had done was instead of 10 interest rate, you had hit the payment key. Is what you said?
That's what I did, and I realized
Okay.
I clicked the wrong one. So
Okay.
I don't know if Ann got that.
Okay. Looks like James put it up there on the screen for everybody. Okay. All right. All right. Hopefully we're now on the same page with this information. Okay. Now, let's take and just sort of show you a couple of other little things as it relates to this that we'll be doing. And once again, don't worry that you don't really understand what we're doing just yet. Right now, this is about using the calculator. Okay. So let's assume that we want to know how much principal and how much interest that maybe we paid over the life of this loan, okay? So after you have all of that information in, and you've just solved for the 877.57, then what I want you to do is as follows. We're going to use what's called the amortization function, and I'm going to try to, let's see if I can go, the way this thing works. Okay. Is it okay if I go ahead and clear this screen?
No, wait a minute, just 1 minute.
Okay.
Dr. Forgy?
Yep.
Forgy, quick question for you.
Yep.
So we're doing the whole calculation, and when we hit that last key, PMT, it just leaves it at 130, or what is it, 360?
Well,
Like it doesn't do anything else. Do we hit another key after that?
no, I mean, once again, just make sure you're not skipping anything. You just go back up to the top of the problem where it starts with the 12 payments per year, hit the shift clear key, and then put in these items, and it should be bulletproof.
We put 100,000 PV, and then we put 10 for the IY,
Yep.
and then we tried 30 shift N, which brings us to 360.
Yep.
And I'm guessing.
You need and all you do is hit the payment key.
And it just, and all we see is PMT come up on the left hand side, and it's, the 360 still remains there.
Hit the compute key at the top left corner, CPT, and then hit payment.
What calculator are you using?
Texas Instruments.
That's okay. All right, we're done. No, specifically, you were asked to get the HP 10B2. There's a reason for that. It operates very differently than the Texas Instruments calculator. The Texas Instruments calculator is not nearly as efficient in doing these problems and will confuse the heck out of you, okay? So you absolutely need to get the HP 10B, okay? It's as simple as that, all right? Okay, moving on. All right, so once you've got down here the $877.57 for the monthly payment, then what you're going to do is as follows. You're going to do one input, 360. Then you're going to do shift, amortize, and then you're going to do equal, equal, equal. Okay. Now, what you're going to get are three different numbers. Okay, so let's just do this together. All right, so once again, this is right after you have solved for the 877.57. You're simply going to start. I'm sorry?
The amortized key, which one is?
It is up in the upper right-hand corner underneath the future value key.
Oh, okay.
All right, so you're going to do one, input, 360, shift, hit the amortized key, which is underneath the present value key. Then it's going to say in your display, 1-360. And what that means is payment number 1 through payment number 360, which is the total duration of the loan. Now, whenever you hit the equal key, the first time it will pop up negative $100,000, which was the total amount of principal that was paid on the loan. In other words, paying back the full $100,000. Okay? You hit equal again, and it gives you negative $215,925 and rounded off 77 cents. That is the total interest that you paid over 30 years on that $100,000 mortgage. Okay? You hit equal again, and what it's giving you is a zero balance at the end of the mortgage. So in other words, after 360 months of payments, we have paid back the $100,000, but simultaneously with that, over 30 years, we have paid $215,925.77 of interest. Okay? Now that should be, at first glance, disgusting. You know, because you're saying to yourself, so basically what you're saying is, in total, how much did we actually pay? Well, you have to add those two together. That's where it gets worse. So that $100,000 mortgage that you got, you actually made payments of $315,925.77. Now, to verify what I just said, go back and type in, hit clear.
Excuse me?
Yep.
When I type this in, it doesn't give me the 100,000 number. It gives me minus 99,996.60.
Yeah, I got the same thing.
Yeah.
Mine did as well.
And then the numbers afterwards are also like incorrect. They never get to the zero balance.
Like negative 250.
There's like 340 at the end.
Okay. How many decimals are showing on your calculator?
2.
That's why. Okay, so to change the number of decimals on your calculator to basically 9 decimal places, hit the Shift key.
Well, I think, but we have to go 0 first, or?
No. Just hit Shift. Hit the equal key, which is right above DISP, display, and 9. What that does is that will kick out your decimals to 9 decimal places. Okay?
And does it do it now for eternity, or is it
Yes.
a problem?
Does it for eternity until you change it to something else. So if you were to only want it to be 2 decimal places, you could do Shift display 2, and it would only do 2 decimal places. For the purposes of a lot of these calculations, it's best to allow the calculator to fully carry things out. Then you can round off after the fact, okay? Because as you saw, and this is a great little example of this, by having the calculator set to round off automatically at 2 decimal places, what will happen is then, in essence, it's not really fully paying off the loan. It's maybe a few cents off here and there, but that trickles over 30 years and 360 payments. It adds up enough to make a difference, okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what I was going to say was to sort of check to see how much we've actually paid on this loan. Just take and type in 877.57 and then multiply that by 360 months. So it's just a simple little calculation. 877.57 times 360 monthly payments, and you get $315,925, and you get 20 cents, which is a little bit different than the 77 here. But once again, the reason for that is we rounded off to 2 decimal places. Okay? All right, are we good?
What was the last thing that you did now?
Okay, the last thing we did was just to simply verify how much we were really paying on this loan over the 30 years. So we made payments of $877.57 for 360 months, which then is simply saying it's a total of $315,925.20 of total outgoing dollars over that 30-year period. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. I'm going to erase this page and move on.
No.
Well, okay. I'm going to have to, because unfortunately this does not allow me to use local pages. So if you're not writing it down as we're going through it, I'm sorry. You can pick it up potentially on the video, but we've got to keep moving.
You can take a picture of it.
You could take a screenshot of it if you want.
Yeah, take it.
That's a way to save all the notes.
No, but it's on Zoom, so you can after the whole thing is recorded. You can go back afterwards.
Yes, you can. Okay.
Bottom, when you're writing at the bottom, it's cut off. And so I don't know if, like, after the 100,000 at the corner, you cannot see what you're writing at the bottom of the
Well,
Just get rid of
I
the
can
video. Hit the minus sign on your video, get rid of it.
On the bottom sign?
Yeah, on the little boxes with everybody?
Yeah, I'm in full screen. I don't see anybody. I'm in full screen.
Oh.
100%. Right there.
okay.
I can move it around this way. I'll move it.
Okay. I'm going to erase this because we need to move on. Okay. All right. So that is an example of, once again, a very basic sort of mortgage payment. Now, let's do something a little bit different from a different perspective, to try to illustrate kind of what's happening. So let's say that we had our calculator set to 1 payment per year. Okay, Okay, clear everything out. And we're going to do the same setup that we had in the previous problem. I just want to illustrate something. And you're going to type in 100,000 as our loan amount, put in 10% as the interest rate, put in 30, shift in. This time, whenever you hit the 30 shift in, it should just simply say 30, because now we're setting this on one payment per year, okay, instead of 12 payments per year. All right, then we're going to simply solve for what is the payment amount. Okay, so let's just see what we get.
$10,607 minus.
Right.
Yeah, no, okay. How do I do the thing? One.
Okay, so you should get, yeah, 10,000, whoops, 607.92 cents. Okay. All right. Now, just for fun, keep in mind that the assumption here is that you would only be making these payments once per year. Okay? Because of that, let's just, this is where you need to sort of turn the brain on and think about this for a second. Our assumption is that in both the previous example as well as this example, that our payments are being received by our lender, and I'm very careful with this language. I'm saying we're making the assumption they are being received by our lender at the end of the period. Now what that means is we may cut a check at the beginning of the month for our mortgage, but the lender doesn't really recognize or receive that payment until the end of the month, primarily for accounting purposes, okay? And the same thing for annual payment. So the idea would be, if this were our mortgage, when would our first actual payment be recognized by the lender? Literally 1 year from now. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so you think about that, and we just were to take this total amount, divide by 12. Let's see what we get.
$883.
Yep. Whereas if we were making monthly payment, our monthly payment was $877.57. So some of you should be asking the question, why are these two numbers different? Okay, well, the reason why they are different is as follows, and this is, once again, turn your brain on to start thinking about this. In the first example, where it was monthly, payments are being received every single month, starting basically at the end of the first month. So assuming we're dealing with a January through December year, our first payment is not going to be recognized by the lender until January 31st. And then our final 12th payment will be recognized December 31st of that year. Does that make sense? And every month in between at the end of each month. Does that make sense? Under the monthly payment. Okay? Whereas under the annual payment that we just calculated, the assumption is the lender is not going to receive that one payment, that first payment, until 12 months from now. Okay? There's not going to be any payments for, in essence, until December 31st, and that one singular payment of $10,607.92 would be then the total annual payment. Now, if you think through the logic on this, why then is the monthly payment less than kind of simply taking this annual payment number and dividing it by 12?
Is it more of like an average, since we're averaging it?
It's not an average. What it's doing, or what is happening here, think of it like this. You're getting basically charged for accrued interest on this annual payment because the lender is having to wait for 12 months before they get that first payment, whereas in the other scenario where they're getting a payment every single month, you're paying off a little bit each month, therefore your balance is less, therefore you're paying a little bit less in interest. Does that make sense?
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Now, the reason I spent so much time going through this is you've got to understand there is a fundamental difference in what is happening with monthly payments calculated on a monthly compounding, monthly, interest rate than just simply taking an annual payment with annual compounding and dividing by 12. They are not the same thing, okay? Because of the accrued interest that you're saving by paying the monthly payment, okay? Are we good? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's erase that. Okay, now, here's where we're going to try to start to begin to explain some of the logic behind some of the calculations and what some of these things actually are. And I find that probably one of the easiest ways to kind of begin to explain this whole thing of time value of money and whatnot, and using the calculator, to use something called timelines. And your book, has their own version of these timelines. Mine are not really that different, maybe ever so slightly, but for the most part, it's all the same. Okay, so what we start with, let's just say we start with a nice, simple sort of real estate purchase. Let's say that we made a purchase of some raw land for $100,000. Okay, that was the purchase. And we anticipate holding this land for how many years? You tell me. How many years do we want to own it? 5, okay?
10 years.
Well, I saw 5 first. Okay, so 5 years. So a 5-year holding period. HP holding period. Okay? And what do we anticipate that the annual increase might be each year in owning this? Like in terms of inflation, that sort of thing. Like a couple percent?
2.5.
2.5%. I like that. Okay. 2.5% sort of increase each year. So what we want to know is basically the question mark that we're looking for is how much is it worth at end of year, EOY, end of year 5. Okay, so that's the question. Those are our inputs. That is what we're trying to solve for, is the value. Now, to put this in calculator sort of vernacular, or once again, even in Excel, same general thing, the purchase price is going to be our present value, our PV. Okay? Our number of years, that's going to be our term. Our increase each year, that's going to be, in essence, our interest rate. And what we're going to be solving for is future value. How much is it worth? Okay? Does that make sense? Conceptually. That's not how we put it in the calculator just yet, but that's conceptually what you should be thinking about. Now, so in this case, let's just sort of map out what this kind of looks like. All right? We, in essence, have a 5-year sort of timeline. All right? at time period 0, right here, right now, we buy this property for $100,000. Okay? Now the first question that you should ask is, why am I making that $100,000 negative? And this is going to be fundamentally important as we kind of go through this. You have basically two ways to look at almost all of these problems. One is from, let's say, a borrower's perspective, and then the reverse is the lender's perspective. Or the purchaser's perspective and the seller's perspective. Okay? And so, in this case, if we're the ones buying the land for $100,000 at time period 0, we're looking at this kind of from the purchaser's perspective, the investor's perspective, in that we are writing a check for $100,000, meaning that is a cash outflow to us, therefore a negative to us. Does that make sense? That's why we're making it a negative number, because we are spending that $100,000. Okay? Because this is the way the calculator begins to keep track of what is an expense, what is a revenue. For this particular simple problem, not so much an issue. But as we get more and more involved, it will be an issue. Okay. So we've got our 5-year term, and then what we're saying is over this 5-year term, we're getting 2.5% increase. Okay? And then what we're solving for is basically right here. What is the value, the future value, at the end of that 5-year period? Okay, does that make sense in terms of the timeline? Okay. Now, question? Max?
Yeah. Is this similar to the equation on
Probably.
9?
Yeah, it's going to be similar to what is in the textbook, yes. Okay? All right.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, other question? Okay, so now to put this in the calculator, what you're going to do is we're going to say, okay, this is on an annual basis. So that's the very first thing we want to start with. So what we're going to do, we're going to put in the calculator, 1 shift payment per year, clear everything out. Okay, that will take the calculator back to letting you know it is set up for 1 payment per year, and you're ready to kind of put in the rest of the information. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put in 100,000, and then what we're going to do is you're going to hit the change sign key, okay, which is over on the left-hand side of the calculator, the 4th key down. All this key does is it changes it from positive to negative or negative to positive, okay? You're going to hit that, and that's now going to be a negative number. Then you're going to put present value right after that. Then you're going to put in 5, shift in, 2.5 as our interest rate or growth rate. Then you're going to simply solve for future value. And so what this is going to do is it's going to tell us what we would anticipate the future value of this property to be at the end of that 5-year holding period. All right, so we should get $113,140.82. Okay, everybody matching up?
I got 2.5.
You got what?
2.5?
Nope. Make sure you're putting in everything exactly as I have it written over here. So basically what we're saying up here, that at the end of that 5 years, we would expect the property to be worth $113,140.82. Now, is it going to be worth that precisely? Maybe not. You know, if this was an estimate, you know, a priori of sort of saying we expect inflation to be 2.5% per year for the next 5 years on average, to give us some sort of an idea as to what this property may be valued for at the end of that 5-year period, okay? So another way of looking at this, just, you know, twisting it and turning it and that sort of thing, that if it is worth $113,140.82, then we've made a dollar profit of what? $13,140.82. Okay, but what you're going to find with a lot of what we're going to be doing is dollar profits are not the same as percentage profits, okay? Especially whenever we take into consideration time. Because think about this for a hot second. If it's taking us 5 years to get $113,000 worth of value, what if instead of a 5-year term, we only had to hold it for 1 year? Okay, don't use your calculator just yet, but what if we only held it for 1 year? If we held it for 1 year, what would our rate of return be? You don't even have to put anything in.
2.5%.
What? What would it be?
2.2%.
No.
2.5%, maybe?
No, okay, listen to what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is our holding period is no longer 5 years. It's only 1 year, but we are getting $113,000 as the value. So what that basically means is we're basically replacing, in one sense, the interest rate with whatever that is going to be. That's what we're going to be solving for. But you don't even have to do that if you eyeball this. This is 1 year. If you go from 100,000 to 113,000 in 1 year, that would be a 13.14% rate of return. Okay? You'll see what I'm talking about. If you go right below what we have written here, and you change the term to 1 year, so one shift in. This is one of the beautiful parts about the calculator, is that if you haven't erased everything, you can just kind of continue on, replace variables and so forth to solve for new things. So if you do that, and I know that some of you, your screen cuts off, so I'm going to kind of go up here, and once you've inputted that, then simply solve for the new rate of return, and let's see what happens. Voila, what I said, 13.14, and then rounding off 14%, okay? If we only held it for 1 year. Now this, my whole purpose in that is, with real estate investing, real estate developing, you've always heard, you know, that the time is money. That's what this is sort of, you know, saying. That, in other words, think of it, if we twist and turn this another, you know, way, that if what we're able to sell a property for is going to be the 113,000, but we have to wait 5 years to get that rate of return, that's only going to be a 2.5% rate of return each of those 5 years. Does that make sense? Whereas if we're able to somehow get that same rate of return, or get that same value of 113,000, then what you're saying is only having to hold it for 1 year, that's the equivalent of getting a 13% rate of return. If you're able to get the deal done quicker, is what we're basically saying. Now, what would you expect if we had a 10-year holding period? What would happen to the overall return? It's going to go down. So, like, for example, if we go in and we simply said, okay, we're going to change the number of years to 10 years, and then resolve for the rate of return. Now our rate of return has dropped to 1.24%. Does that make sense? Okay? Here's a simple way of thinking about this whole thing of holding period. Growing up, I heard all the people talk about, you know, how they bought, you know, some land, you know, 30 years ago, and they paid, you know, what, $100,000 for that land. They held it for 30 years, and then they were able to maybe double their money, you know, over that 30-year period. Well, initially, what everyone thinks of whenever you say, okay, I bought it for $100,000, I sold it, let's say, for $200,000, you've doubled your money, you've got a 100% rate of return. Well, that is true if you sold it within 1 year. But if you had to wait for 30 years to get that, your return is going to be a lot less than 100%. Does that make sense? Because you, in essence, are taking into account sort of the time value of money of basically that additional sort of holding period, okay? And the more or the longer that you hold something, the lower your rate of return is generally going to be, all other things being held constant, okay? All right, moving forward. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. All right, so let's actually take that as an example here for a second. So, one payment per year, and let's say, we're going to clear everything out. Let's say that we bought something for $100,000. And we held on to it for 30 years. And we were able to sell it at the end of that 30 years for twice what we paid for it, future value. Okay? What is going to be our annualized rate of return, solving for basically the interest rate? So once again, to kind of use our little timeline thing here for a second, as to what's sort of happening, we buy it for $100,000, cash outflow, negative number. We expect to get, in the future, $200,000, positive number, because we're receiving that money. That's why I'm putting it above the line, okay, over here, $200,000, for 30 years. And what we're solving for is, what is that percentage change or rate of return over that period? Does that make sense, everybody, conceptually, yes or no? Okay? So, let's do it, see what we get.
.34.
Yep. 2.34% rounded, okay? That doesn't sound like a great return, does it? Because it's really not. But yet, most of you, if I told you, without telling you how long I held it, that I bought a piece of land for $100,000 and I sold it for $200,000 and left out how long I held it for, you'd be thinking, woo, tons of money, okay, in terms of rate of return. But the reality is, if I had to hold it for 30 years to get that, that's only a 2.3% rate of return. Okay? Now, just to kind of illustrate what I was just saying, what if I could reduce that holding period down to 10 years? So 10, shift in, and then solve for the interest rate again. It helps a little, but you know, still, I mean, yeah, it significantly increases our rate of return from a 2% rate of return to a 7% rate of return, but still, that's not dramatic. You know, I mean, it's a few percent, you know, and that's significant. But let's lower it some more in terms of the holding period. 5-year holding period.
So Dr. Bordeaux, would you personally not hold on to an investment for, let's say, 20, 30 years? Would you typically, if investing, sell it 15,
well,
48, 7?
What it boils down to is you've got to look at the trade-off of what is happening with the value of the property relative to that holding period. Here, we're saying, we're sort of keeping the value constant, we're just changing the holding period. And so, you know, in other words, it's sort of like saying that for the example that I'm giving here, we buy it for 100,000, we sell it for 200,000, but yet, what if we held it for 30 years? Well, our rate of return would only be 2.34. But if instead we could still sell it for the same price, but sell it only after 10 years, we'd be getting 7% a year for 10 years. Or if we sold it only after 5 years, we'd be getting a 14.8% rate of return. So it's all a function of what the value, or how much you paid for it, how much you sold it for, but specifically how long you held it for. That holding period is absolutely mission critical on this, because that really determines everything, you know, in terms of what kind of a rate of return you're going to get. Now, let's say we lower this a little bit more in terms of the holding period. We go to 2 years. Yep, 41%.
Yeah. That's significant. I mean, that's a massive difference.
Yeah, and then you go to 1 year.
Right there.
So you go to 1 year, and then you're at 100%, which is what everyone thought from the very beginning. Whenever you just simply say, I'm doubling my money, 100% rate of return. So the problem is our brains are wired to think about rates of return on an annualized basis. And that is a wrong way to sort of think about something that you're holding for more than a year, okay? Or less than a year. So let's trick things up a little bit. What if, instead of 1 year as our holding period, we put in half a year? So that would be 0.5 in, or 0.5 shift in. Woo!
300?
300. Okay, because our holding period would only be basically 6 months. Okay, and so forth, so on. So in other words, the point is, because you're going to have the ability to reinvest, you know, every 6 months. All right, if you sold it within 6 months. This is why. I'll tell you a very quick story. It's a true story from, it had to be 25 years ago. I had a student that had a used car sort of resale business on the side. And so his business model was very simple. He would go out, he would buy a used car, pay cash for it, immediately put an ad back then in the paper, okay, pre-internet, all right, put an ad in the paper, meet with people, have that car sold in less than a month, okay? So if you think about it in those terms, kind of clear all this out here for a second. You buy a car for $10,000 and you're able to sell it for, let's just say, $11,000, okay, without doing anything. No changes, no modifications, whatever, keeping it, it's very simple. Well, obviously, that's a $1,000 increase in value. Okay? Now, based on what we just learned, what is, assuming that he held it for a year, what would his rate of return be? 10%. 10%. Okay, simple calculation. Take 11,000 minus 10,000 gives you 1,000. 1,000 divided by basically 10,000 gives you 10%. Okay, or you put it in the calculator, do the same thing. And in this case, yeah, we'll go ahead and do it this way. All right, so 1 payment per year, clear everything out. We put in 10,000 negative present value, 11,000, future value, in this case 1 year as the holding period, solve for the interest rate or the rate of return, and it should be 10%, let's just double check. Okay, 10%. All right, but what if he's able to sell it in 6 months, half that time? So 0.5, shift in, it's a 21% rate of return, okay? And you can go down from there. Okay, now here's the point. This is the part that I left out of the story. So he had no cash of his own. So what he did to buy these cars was he was getting cash advances on credit cards, okay, and paying some ridiculous interest of like 21% a year, okay? So this is where those of you that are really thinking about this, you're going to understand the brilliance of this, okay? If he's having to pay 21% annualized interest, can he make money selling these cars? Well, that all depends. How long does he have to hold them for? Okay? If his holding period is a year, he's only getting a 10% rate of return, and he's borrowing money at 21%, he's losing his shirt. Okay? But if he's able to sell them in less than half a year, in other words, less than 6 months, he's going to make some money. Okay? I mean, most of you have used credit cards before, and you know, you get daily interest charges, monthly interest charges, and so forth, so on. But the point being is that when you annualize it, it might be a 21% interest rate, but if you pay it off quick enough, number one, you may not incur any interest, depending on how quick you pay it off, but usually with cash advances, you do have some sort of an interest rate that you have to pay from the moment that you borrow the money. And under those circumstances, under this scenario, what we're saying is, yeah, if he could buy a car at the beginning of the month, and within less than a month, he's able to have that car sold, he's going to make money. It's as simple as that. But if he has to hold that car for more than 6 months, he's going to lose money. But here's the reason I'm saying this is sort of brilliant is because most of us, initially, the way our brains are wired would be to say, oh, he's only able to make a 10% rate of return on the sale of that car. And interest rates are 21%, therefore, he's not going to make any money. He's going to lose money. You follow me? But because his holding period is so much less than a year, then you've got to take into account that this 21% that he may be paying to a credit card that's the annual number, and he's really, once again, he's looking at only owning something for less than a month. Okay? Make sense?
If he sells a car a month, he's making a 215% annualized return versus his 20%.
So I'm going to believe you with that. But the point being is, he's going to make a lot of money pretty quickly if he's consistent in being able to do this. Okay? All right. That in of itself is worth the price of tuition for this class. Okay? Understanding this. Okay? Because this is the way you begin to start thinking, which is very different than the average, ordinary way that people think about borrowing money and using financing. The same exact concept applies to, I'm a real estate developer, I have a loan on a property, maybe a construction loan or a permanent loan, whatever it might be, and I'm looking at selling off units, townhomes, houses, whatever it might be. The longer I have to hold that inventory, the more interest I'm paying on that inventory. Therefore, the lower the rate of return I'm going to receive on that inventory. But if I can sell that inventory quickly, then and not have to incur that much in debt, that's a wonderful thing. Why do you think so many developers want to do pre-sales before they even build the product? Well, part of the reason is that they really don't have any holding cost. It's kind of like once the thing is built, it's already paid for by the consumer, and so they're not really having to deal with long-term sort of debt issues. Okay? All right, just food for thought. All right, I'm going to go over here to the screen real quick. It looks like I've got 18 chats. I have no idea what they all are. I'm just going to look real quick. It looks like all of these are about calculator stuff. Yeah, okay, we're good. All right. Okay, any questions up to this point? Okay, you guys need a break or we keep going? I'm looking at you. We need a break or we keep going? Keep going? Okay, good. All right. All right, so another way of flipping this thing around is potentially how long maybe do we want to hold something if we want to achieve a certain rate of return? All right, so we're gonna change things up a little bit, and we're gonna say, all right, we've got something that we've bought for $100,000. And we're going to sell it for $200,000. But what we want to achieve is a 10% rate of return. So the question is, how long can we hold this property to achieve 10% rate of return? Okay, does everybody understand what I'm asking? All right, so in other words, we're starting flipping things around a little bit. So timeline perspective is going to look like this. We want to get a 10% rate of return. We bought something for $100,000. We're going to sell it for $200,000, but what we want to know is basically how long can we hold it to achieve that. Based upon what we just went through, the shorter the time we hold it, the better chance of getting the rate of return we want. Okay, so let's just see. All right, so in this case, one payment per year up here at the top, and then clear all. All right, then 100,000, change sign, present value. 200,000 is our future value. 10% is our interest rate. And then now we're going to be solving for N, the number of periods, or in this case, number of years that we could hold it, the maximum number of years that we could hold it. All right, so let's see what we get.
7.27.
That sounds very possible. Yep. 7.27 years. So, simple question to you, based on what we just talked about. If we sold it in 5 years, would we meet our rate of return? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. In other words, if we sell it for anything less than 7.27 years, we are going to meet and or exceed our rate of return. If we take longer than 7.27 years to sell it, we will not meet our required rate of return of 10%. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes or no?
You froze for 30 seconds.
I'm sorry?
You froze for 20 seconds.
Oh, I did? Okay. So,
Yes, on my end. It might have been.
okay. Well, I'll repeat it one more time. So basically, what is happening is that for this investment, if you bought it for $100,000, you sold it for $200,000, and our expectation is that we want a minimum of a 10% rate of return, then what we're saying is, based on the solution to this problem, if we're able to sell it quicker than 7.27 years, then we have made a profit, or we've met or exceeded our rate of return. If we take longer than 7.27 years, then in essence, we are not going to meet our required rate of return of 10%. Okay? Is everybody good? All right. I do notice that one of my images is frozen. I'm not really sure why, but let me see. I don't really know that matters one way or the other, but anyway. Okay, you all can still hear me, yes? Okay.
Yes.
That is the important thing. All right. And you can see the handwriting, so that's what's really important. Okay. All right. Now, let's just kind of continuing on with the same problem, just to illustrate what I was just saying. So if we basically, let's just say that we held it for 9 years, so 9 shift in, and we want to see what that would do to our rate of return. So let's just 9 shift in, solve for our rate of return. So our rate of return would drop to basically 8.01% versus the 10% because we held it longer than we should have, okay, in order to achieve our 10% rate of return, okay? What I'm trying to get you to do is to see the interplay that exists between these different variables so that it begins to sort of, start to make sense. Oh, if I raise this one, here's the impact. If I lower this one, here's the impact, and so forth, so on. And that's the beauty of using the financial calculator is that, once again, we can kind of change up these individual assumptions as we go through, and then you can see what the resulting impact is in terms of the calculation. Okay. All right. Let me see here. If I'm missing things I need to put in. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about payments versus lump sums. All right. What we have been focused on for several of these problems has been we've bought something for $100,000, we sold it for $200,000, here was our interest rate, here was our term, that sort of thing. But what if there's something more happening while we own that property? For example, we're receiving rent from a tenant, okay? Therefore, we're getting payments coming in, all right? So, we'll use some new numbers just for fun. All right, change it up a little bit. So let's say we bought something for $1 million, okay? And ultimately, we plan on selling it for $1.5 million. But while we own it, we are getting monthly rental payments of, let's say, $11,000 a month in rent. Okay, and you tell me how long of a holding period we want. How many years?
7 years.
7 years. Okay, so 1 million purchase, 1.5 million sale. Okay, so let's see how we set this up. Okay, what's going to be our very first step? Let's see if you're paying attention.
1 shift payment
No.
per year.
No.
12 shift payment per year.
Correct. Why?
Because you're receiving monthly rent.
Correct. Correct. Okay? All right? So in this case, 1 million is going to be our purchase price, or the amount that we're going to be spending on the property. That's going to be our present value. 1.5 million is going to be our future value, or what we're selling the property for. $11,000 a month. Now, is this 11,000 going to be a positive or a negative?
Positive.
A positive. Yay! Woo! All right. Score 1 for the team. All right. It's a positive payment received, and it is going to be for 7 shift in, which 7 times 12 is what?
84.
Okay. And then we're going to simply solve for the rate of return or the interest rate associated with that.
16.97.
Okay, let's just double check. %16.97%. All right. Now, let's think about this just for a second. A couple of things. Let's look at this kind of from a timeline perspective, just so that you kind of, once again, visualize what's going on. We bought it for $1 million. We sell it for $1,500,000. Okay, but then each year we're getting, basically within that year, each month, we are getting payments that we are receiving of $11,000 every single month for 7 years or 84 months. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay. Now, let's just for fun, let's say, because this is an exercise that, you know, obviously based on some level of maybe reality, what happens if our rent rate changes? Okay, that maybe market conditions have changed, we have to accept either less rent, or we get lucky and we get more rent. How is that going to impact us? So let's just say that our rent, okay, you tell me, instead of $11,000 a month, how much rent do you give me a number.
12,000.
How much?
12,000.
Okay, let's just do that, 12,000. So we would just simply put in 12,000 as our new payment, and then we could resolve for what our new rate of return would be if we were able to raise our rent to 12,000. So basically, our rate of return goes from 16.97 to 18.01, and the reason for that increase as a rate of return is simply because we're raising our rent from 11 to 12,000. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yeah, Professor, for some reason I'm getting 18.19, and the other calculation I got 17 point, a little bit higher for some reason.
Are you using the HB10B?
I'm
Okay, you froze up there for a second.
I'm using a download for like the app.
That's probably why.
All right.
As I said, there are little nuances there with the app for the HB10B, some of which depending on, once again, whether it's rounding and a couple of other ways in which they're algebraically solving for the answer, it'll be off a little bit, but this...
I'll make sure to get the actual calculator.
Yeah. Okay, All right. Are we good up to this point? Everybody still with me? Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about reversion value. Okay, in real estate, you hear this term quite often. Somebody will say the reversion value on this property is X number of dollars, or somebody abbreviate to somebody say the reversion is X number of dollars. What this reversion means is this is what you're in essence expecting to sell the property for at some future date. And the reason it's called reversion is because it's kind of like you've spent money up front to buy something, and then at the end, whenever you sell it, that money is reverting back to you. Okay, it's coming back to you. And so that's the reason kind of for the term reversion, but that's just the standard normal language that gets used. So whenever you see problems and they say, well, the reversion value or the expected reversion value or whatever, it's just simply referring to what is its future value or expected value at some point in the future. Okay, so that having been said, let's say that we buy a property for $100,000 and we hold it for how many years? Give me a number.
5.
5 years. And we want an expected or rate of return of what percent?
15.
15, I like the way you think. Okay, 15% rate of return. And for this particular property, we bought it for $100,000. So how much in rent might we be able to get off of it? Just give me a number, annual number or monthly number, I don't care.
$9,000.
$9,000, and that would be more of an annual number. So $9,000 rent annually. Okay? And what we want to know is calculate the reversion value. All right, so there's your problem. Now then, let's think about the setup. One payment per year, since we're dealing with annual rent. Clear everything out. Okay, 100,000 is going to be our expense, present value. All right, 5 years is going to be our term. 15% is going to be our interest rate. And then we're going to put in 9,000 as a positive payment, rent payment. So to solve for the future value or the reversion value, we're simply going to solve for future value.
$140,454.
$140,454 and 29 cents rounded. Okay? So all we're saying there is we bought it for $100,000, we hold it for 5 years, we want a 15% rate of return, and we're getting $9,000 a year in rent. Boom. That's what we would need to get on that property at the end of that 5-year period for its reversion value for it to make sense to us. Okay, does that make sense? Yes, no, possibly, could be. I know you're starting to get worn out a little bit. I recognize that. We've still got a little bit of a distance to go. Okay. So let's see.
We're halfway through class, can we take our 15-minute break?
Oh, I'm sorry?
So we're halfway through class, can we take a break?
We can take a 5-minute, we can take a 5-minute break. Okay, 5-minute break. So we're going to come back, whatever time it is now. It's 10:08, so we'll say roughly 10:15.
This is a great speed.
We'll pick up the pace.
Everything's going fair.
That's relative.
For me, on my end.
Well, Adam, by the way, I found the order. Yeah, I'm telling you. My email is still fucked up. You're on speaker. Yeah. So, hey, Max, do you do any tutoring?
Is that a serious question?
That was a serious question.
I've been following along very well this class.
Okay. You see what?
I am working on setting up a graduate assistantship with Dr. Porgy, and I believe student help is part of that.
8. Well, you let me know.
Okay.
For you too, Max.
I think it kind of helped that I took a lot of notes when reading the textbook. The textbook is really well planned out. It's really step by step and explains the thinking behind each number.
When are you doing the graduate assistantship, Max?
As soon as the university, the different departments process everything that they need to process. So yesterday I checked up and things were looking good, and then the weekend came, so I'll check back on Monday. Is Chris still in here?
Hello?
Chris Walker?
Yes.
You from FAU?
Yeah, I did one semester there.
Okay. Were you in Dr. Rennie's class?
Dr. Who?
John Rennie?
No.
Okay.
I just did a chemistry course there with Dr. Sem something, some third.
Okay, I remember that guy.
Oh, you know him, yeah.
That wasn't that great.
That was not great at all. Tito was his name, yeah, Dr. Tito. Did you leave directly from FAU, or you been working for a while, or?
No, I graduated last week from urban planning.
Oh wow, congrats.
Jump right.
It's been the school book.
Yeah, I got that. That's kind of a perk.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, we've taken some time away, and it at least shows for me. So.
Is it a tough transition, or it's all coming back to you right away?
No, it all makes sense. It's more putting it in the calculator that's I'm just getting used to it, because I've done this kind of thing manually, but putting it in the calculator, and that's the part where I'm learning. I have to read the book and stuff.
Manually. Well, it's probably easier manually, right?
It is much easier. It makes a lot more sense. So.
Took me 5 minutes to find the keys. on the calculator.
I had the manual open up and I'm like, well, he's writing it a lot easier than the manual.
Well, I'm now getting it. It's the first time I've used a financial calculator, so.
If you guys need help with the calculator, go on YouTube, and Dr. Fogey class last year, this semester, last year class, if you look up YouTube, our class, REE 5880, most of all the classes for this program are on YouTube from the previous year. So you go a year before, and you'll be able, in that class, because it was a live class, he does a calculator while he's doing a lecture. I guess he can't do it this semester. See, I had to drop the class last year, so I took the class already. So the best thing for you, if you guys go to last year's class, he does the step on the calculator, like in the screen.
Wait, who's speaking?
James.
James, okay, all right.
I don't have my last name up, but yeah, it's James. For some reason my camera's down. But if you go on he sent the email out, and you do first class last semester, you'll see where he walks it through. Hey, Adam. You see where it walks it through, and he walks it on the calculator step by step. Like, as he's pushing the buttons, you could see him pushing the buttons on the calculator from last time.
Oh, that would be great, yeah. I mean, I'm now getting it, but it did take me a few minutes. That's why the first calculation.
Yeah, 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks, next 2 weeks is gonna be, your struggle's gonna be with the calculator next, if you've never seen the calculator.
All right.
Is that the YouTube video link he sent out via email last week?
It's actually this class, but last year. This exact class we're in right now, but last year. So every class that he did last year, the last 8, this semester, every class last year is on YouTube. Every class you're doing, if it's not online, is gonna be on YouTube.
Oh, that's great, okay.
So the year before, so every class that we took the year before, the program that came in the year before, all the classes are on YouTube, unless if it's online. If it's an online class, then it's not going to be on YouTube.
And you can see people in the classroom.
Yeah, you can see people in the classroom.
So is anyone going to the actual class next week? I guess he starts in live classes.
I'm going.
Yeah, me too. I need to be face to face.
I just hope I can coordinate it with the GIS class.
It's right after it, right? Because I'm in the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got the same schedule, I think. Anybody who's just started.
Well, I mean, there's students in the MPA program too in here, so. I think, maybe I'm wrong.
That's going to be a tough one because you guys got to be in the lab, in that computer lab.
Right. So yeah, and that class has way more students in it. So they're going to do like a rotation for that, but I don't
Were
know
you
if
able
we
to
can figure
download
something out
everything?
or get the Citrix online access or something.
I didn't get those platforms, so I couldn't download Arc Pro, but I just went on Chrome on my Mac and got the like ArcGIS online thing set up that we needed.
Yeah, it's good. You might have some configuration problems. Try to get that going. Adam, how much more you got left?
4 classes, man.
4? I got a total.
Yeah. What about you?
I got half left.
Oh, okay.
I got 18 credits left. After this year, I got 18. I'll be done in the summer.
Well, that's good. How's your wife?
Everything's good. The baby's about to be 4 months in a couple of days. Tomorrow.
Awesome, man. Congratulations, bro.
And if you're taking that master's program over 2 years or over 1 year?
I did it over 2 years. I technically started, I think it was winter 2019.
Yeah, we started at the same time.
Yeah, so like with my...
It's too much in 1 year?
No, it's not. It's just my work schedule. I couldn't really make it work, so I was taking classes when I could. But starting this past January, I've been able to take everything. So I have 2 classes this semester, 2 classes next semester, and I'll be done.
2 classes this summer.
Okay.
No, I got that done. I'm so happy I got the capstone project done. I'm gonna warn all of you right now, the judges are harsh, but it's for your own benefit.
Which one, what class is it?
It's the capstone project. It's the real estate development process, part 2, where you basically have to, do a 50-page paper and a presentation to all the big wigs on the advisory board and stuff. You know, you have to do a market analysis, you have to do a financial analysis, a regulatory analysis, site analysis for a piece of property that Dr. Forty will pick out, and you know, you have a little group that get it done, and that's pretty much what you do for 8 weeks until.
And who is picking out the property?
Dr. Forty.
Oh.
So it's a group project and not individual?
It's a group project. Has to be group. There was one guy asked to do it by himself, but he was turned down.
Okay, we need to get started. All right, so we've got a handful of things left to finish. We've got basically right at an hour to finish them. So let's get this moving. All right, so one of the next things we want to go through is to calculate what we refer to at least technically, present value of an annuity or fixed payment. So what this is, typically we use this for valuing leases or leasehold interest. In other words, if you have it could be commercial tenant, could be residential tenant, industrial tenant, doesn't really matter, but you know what sort of a lease that you are engaging with them for. And so if you're dealing with a commercial tenant, you might have a 5-year lease, you might have a 10-year lease, could have a 20-year lease, whatever that is. What you want to know in many cases, and your lender wants to know, is kind of what is the present value or the current value of that lease if it were to be sort of prepaid to, excuse me, today. In other words, what is the value of it to you? So, let's assume that we have a lease, and once again, this is going to be monthly, so 12 payments per year. And assume that the lease payment is going to be, you tell me, how much a dollar amount per month, lease payment? Assuming a commercial property of some sort.
$5,000.
$5,000, love that number. All right, $5,000 is going to be our lease payment. So that's going to be a payment amount that we are going to receive. How long is the term of the lease? How many years?
8 years.
8 years. Okay. All right. And from our perspective, let's say that our cost of capital is 5%. What we want to know is what is the present value of that payment, or what is also is referred to in finance terms as an annuity. Okay, it's just a fixed payment for a set period of time. So once again, kind of looking at this from a timeline perspective, what we've got going on, 8 years. All right, and we want to get 5% sort of rate of return or discount rate associated with this, and we are getting each month $5,000. Not each year, but each month, all the way throughout for the 8 years, which 8 times 12 is what?
96.
96 total sort of payments or lease payments. All right, so whenever you put this into the calculator, whenever you hit the 8 shift in, you're going to see 96 pop up in the display, meaning that it's 96 payments. All right, so let's see what we get.
Minus 394.95. Minus
Okay.
394.95 cents. Can it be?
Okay.
I think that's a little off.
394,947.20 cents.
Oh, you didn't say the whole number before.
Okay.
Unimportant.
Okay, so the present value of this lease to us would be $394,000. Now, let's just, for simple math, just to kind of put things into context, we're getting $5,000 a month for how many months?
96.
96. So doing the simple math, we're getting a total of $480,000 in payments combined. So why is this number, the 394, less than the 480? Why are we discounting it? Because we haven't received it yet. In other words, that's 8 years into the future that we're having to wait for all of those payments to occur. So if we could get all of the money now, in other words, if they were to prepay their lease right here, right now, cash money, we would be willing to accept the $394,000 or $5,000 a month for the next 8 years. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yes.
That you're willing to accept a discount if you pay it up front. Okay, now, I'm going to give you a short version of a longer story. So back in the I guess it'd be the late 1990s, so once again almost, well, 20 years ago plus, you had this whole dot-com kind of implosion. You had all these dot-com companies that were springing up in the late 90s, and most of the owners of real estate space that were these folks wanting to be tenants were saying, we don't believe in your business model. We don't really think that, you know, this online business that you're, you know, throwing out there really makes any economic sense. We don't see how you're going to make any money with it, blah, 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 blah. And so the short version of the story is that a lot of the property owners at that time, because they did not believe in the economic value of many of those sort of dot-coms that ultimately did go bankrupt, they were actually saying, let me back the story up just a little bit, those dot-coms were doing what? They were getting tons of money in equity capitalization from Wall Street, okay? In the sense that everybody was investing in them, you know, and giving them lots of upfront cash without a proven business model. So what ultimately ended up happening is they had all this upfront cash. Their business model really didn't make sense, but everybody was investing in them because they thought, woo, that's going to all make tons of money in the future. So, but the real estate owners, for the most part, were fairly savvy and saying, hey, we probably shouldn't rent to these guys, or if we do, we should charge them up front and have them prepay their rent for their entire lease. And so that's what happens in a lot of cases, is this very situation, the problem that I'm describing, would have been done for that tenant and saying, okay, I want you to pay me right now a discounted value of, let's say, $394,000, and it's going to save you some money over the next 5 years, but the real reason I'm doing it is I don't think you're going to be around in 5 years to even be able to pay this lease. And they were right, for the most part. Okay? Well, the other way in which this kind of number gets used is whenever you're going to a lender and you maybe own the building already, and you're saying, I want to maybe do some additional renovations on the property or whatever it might be, and the lender says to you, okay, you own the building, maybe outright, you don't have any other loans against it, so you want to do some improvements on the building, I will loan you based upon the value of your leases in the property. And so the lender, in many cases, will use this number to, in some cases, make loans on improvements to the property. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, quick question.
Yep.
Just a couple questions. Present value of area is not in the parentheses. What is that? Future payment.
Okay, well, James, I'm not understanding. You're kind of garbled. Can you repeat it one more time?
Okay, up top, I'm rewriting your notes here. You're saying in parentheses, something payment.
Fixed payment.
Fixed payment.
Yep. Okay. Okay. All right. Other thoughts, comments, observations on this? Okay. Moving forward. right. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to be doing a lot of is what's referred to as discounted cash flow, or DCF analysis. And what this basically boils down to is that as we become more realistic in terms of what our income and our expenses and our valuations and that sort of thing are over time, we try to get a bit more precise with our calculations, okay? And so up to this point, whenever we were, just like in the previous example, we made the assumption that the lease was a fixed amount, okay? Every month they pay whatever it was, $5,000 or whatever that lease payment was, every single month, yes? But what if that's not the case? What if in some months they don't pay? What if in some months maybe you are charging them maybe percentage rent and they pay you more, okay, based on sales that maybe they have? What if in some years you have more expenses than you anticipated? Other years you have less expenses. In other words, the point being is your income may be, and your expenses may be variable over time. So in other words, they go up, they go down. They go up, they go down. And so we need to have a way to be able to account for that in terms of using the calculator and then ultimately using Excel in terms of this discounted cash flow analysis. So what that basically boils down to is we're going to say, let's say that we've got a property with a 5-year holding period, and each of those years it's going to generate a different amount of rental income. So maybe in the first year it generates $10,000. In the second year maybe it generates $12,000. In the third year maybe $9,000. In the fourth year, maybe $14,000. And in the fifth year, maybe $11,000, okay? So it went up, it went down, it went up, and it went down, okay? So in terms of being able to kind of deal with that, we need to basically employ a discounted cash flow to adjust each of those relative to the time period and whatever expenses that we may have. So in this case, what we have, one payment per year, clear everything out, and this is over a 5-year period. Well, actually, no, let's not do that. Bring back up. We'll do it differently. Okay. So over this 5-year period, what we're going to have is the following. All right. In the first year, 0, we're going to have 0 as our cash flow. It's a new key on the calculator. We're going to talk about it here in just a second. Don't put anything in on your calculator just yet. Just hold with me while we kind of walk through this. Then we're going to have 10,000 as a cash flow, 12,000 as a cash flow, 9,000 as a cash flow, 14,000 as a cash flow, and 11,000 as a cash flow. So each of these cash flows obviously correlates to what's happening in each of these years, okay? So now, on your calculator, specifically, the cash flow key is third key down, third key over, okay? So it's almost kind of right there in the middle. It says CF and then sub J, Everybody see it? Okay, so that is your cash flow key. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to put in everything kind of as we have it written here. All right, then what we're going to do initially is we're going to then say, all right, well, what sort of a rate of return do we want, or not sort of a rate of return, I'm sorry, what sort of a discount rate do we want to use on this set of cash flow? So like the previous problem, we said like a 5% discount rate. So if we put in 5% as our interest rate, and then we solve for net present value. Okay, so let's start with this, and I'll kind of explain how it all works here in just a second. We should get 48,319.32. Now, one thing I just realized that I left out, well, the net present value key is not the present value key. It's a different key. And the net present value key is, you hit the shift key and it's underneath the PRC. Underneath the price key it says NPV in gold letters. Everybody see that? Okay. All right. So when you do that, you should end up with 48,319.32. What this is saying is that that is the discounted value of those cash flows to us today using a 5% discount rate. So once again, much like the previous example, let's go through and actually calculate the real dollars that we would be getting. If we took 10,000, 12,000, 9,000, 14,000, and 11,000, and we add all those up.
56.
Okay, I'm just going to double check. Yep. $56,000. So much like the previous example, same sort of thing. This is the total dollar amount that we're receiving over the 5-year sort of lease term, and it's greater than, obviously, this sort of present value or net present value, excuse me, for that same period of time. So, in other words, this, yet again, kind of represents what that present value of that lease is to us today. The difference between this problem and the previous problem is this is dealing with multiple cash flows that are different, okay? Instead of the same fixed cash flow, it's dealing with multiple cash flows that are different, okay? Max?
So give a tenant the option of paying the 48,000.
Yes. Okay. Other questions? Yep.
When did you use, or how did you determine the 5% rate?
In this particular case, I just pulled it out of thin air. Okay. Okay. But in terms of what you would do as a practical matter, is you would look at what is sort of your sort of cost of capital, your sort of desired sort of rate of return or hurdle rate for you as an individual, or if this is for a company, what that company's sort of required rate of return would be. Okay?
So that hurdle rate would be looking at what, like the prime interest rate?
Yeah, but it's a little bit more complicated than that in the sense that it could be whatever you borrow money at plus then what your risk premium would be for you as an investor that could be very different than anybody else. And, and a simple way to kind of explain that, let's assume that we're talking about especially real estate products like, I don't know, multifamily housing in a high-income neighborhood, okay? If my whole life has been spent dealing with multifamily housing in high-income neighborhoods, I probably really understand that market, understand the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, all of that. But if someone else were to come in that's never participated in that market before, they may have very different expectations as to kind of the risk associated with that particular property type. Because they may not fully understand it, they may then misvalue it in terms of what they think the rate of return should be or could be, whereas someone, let's say like myself, might have a much better understanding of it and have a more realistic expectation of what that required rate of return should be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of it is driven by the knowledge and understanding of the investor for that particular sort of submarket. Okay. Moving forward. All right. All right, let's talk about one other aspect of reversion value or terminal value, using specifically something your book uses, the Gordon growth model. Okay, so one of the things that we also do whenever we're calculating the terminal value or reversion value for a commercial property is we typically will look beyond the current year or the last year that we own that property and look at what the income is for the year thereafter, okay? And so what we're doing is the income approach to value is a forward-looking valuation, meaning that the value is all based on future income, okay? In other words, if you don't have any future income on a property, theoretically, it has no value, okay, from the income approach, okay? Because it's all about, and there are two different kinds of income as far as we're concerned. One is sort of current income, operating income, net operating income, that money that we receive monthly, annually from owning the property, sort of those lease payments and so forth, so on. And then we have the reversion value, which we get at the end, in terms of an income. All right? So the two ways you make money on real estate is operating income and then reversion value or terminal value at the end. Okay? Now, so this Gordon growth model sort of tries to take into account what growth rates may be in terms of rental income, and then also sort of, what your what the growth rate is, and then also what your discount rate or specifically your required rate of return might be. All right? So in this case, let's make the assumption that we've got an annual discount rate of 8%, and we have an annual growth rate of 3%. Okay? Now, in this particular case, what we're going to be doing is saying, all right, kind of like what we had done with the ERV model previously, where we had income over a cap rate gives us value. Here, what we're doing is we're sort of saying that this rate of return that we've got down here, we're going to apply a growth rate to it, and so we're going to sort of subtract out the growth rate. So this is going to be the discount rate minus the growth rate is going to basically give us the cap rate. So what it's going to be is 8% minus 3% or 5% is going to be the number that we're going to use for this. And we're going to deal more with this later, so don't worry too much about it right now. But let's assume that we have an annual income of $10,000 on the property for next year. So this would be like if we own the property for 5-year holding period, and we're saying that basically in year 6, the income, or NOI, is equal to $10,000. All right, so we're going to put that in, and then simply take 10,000 divided by 5%, and that would give us a valuation of 200,000 for our reversion or our terminal value. Okay, now the question that you've got to be sort of asking is, all right, well, why do we do this 8% minus this 3% to get basically a cap rate here? Because what we're doing, and mathematically this is one of those things where Excel would show us, and it would actually be a much easier way to kind of visualize this. But what we're really doing is we're applying this growth rate, and we're saying, okay, if we make the assumption that every year the income is going to grow by 3%, but our discount rate is 8%, the net effect of that really is 5% sort of flat, all right? And so 10,000 divided by the 5% means our valuation using this Gordon growth model is going to be $200,000, okay? Now, when and how does this get used? In the event that you are expecting the income on an investment to escalate over time. So let me do a quick, like for example, let's assume for a moment we expected no growth, okay? That we put a 0 for growth. Then that means our interest rate or our cap rate would be 8%, yes? But our value, look at what happens to our value. Our value drops to $125,000. We lost $75,000 worth of value, and the reason for that is because we're not receiving that 3% annual growth in rents. The rent is staying flat, okay?
Can you repeat that, please, the last steps?
Okay.
Thank you.
So the assumption would be if we got rid of the growth rate, and we simply said we have a growth rate in rents that's 0, then we remove it from down here where we abstracted basically the growth rate from our discount rate, and that means that we would only apply our discount rate of 8%, and so 10,000 divided by 8% would mean the resulting value would only be 125,000 instead of 200,000. But the whole reason behind that is, think of it like this. So ignore the math here for a second, and just think of it from this standpoint. You're going to buy a property, and you're told it's going to generate $10,000 a year of income. And you're happy with that. How much should you pay for it? Okay, well, if it has $10,000 in income, and your rate of return that you want to use, your discount rate, is 8%, you'd be willing to pay $125,000 for that investment. But if you can show that every single year you're able to raise the rents by 3% by adding in this growth rate, or in essence subtracting it out down here mathematically, then that means the value of that property would go up to $200,000 to you as an investor. Because you're basically saying, for all the years you're going to own it, it ultimately is going to be going up every single year, 3% in rental income. Okay? Does that make sense? It's a shortcut to get at basically what the future value of the property would be. Okay?
Is there a tolerance rate on what that percent?
It's not so much a tolerance, it's more of what you would anticipate happening. 3% is probably a bit high. I mean, you know, normally you're probably going to look at like 1.5%, something like that. But nonetheless, that growth rate in and of itself is what magically adds value. And all you're really doing is you're saying, if I raise the rents, it's worth more. Simple as that. That's all that's really happening here. Okay?
So could it be that there's periods of time where you could settle for much less if you're in a location or a trending location?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
So what is the assumption with the growth rate? Is it based on cost of living or?
Okay, let's just say hypothetically that over the past 10 years, you've looked at a particular market and it has grown by 3% in value every single year. Simplistically, you would say, oh, let's keep the party going at 3% a year indefinitely. Now, is that realistically going to happen? No. Okay? Realistically, yeah, it's probably, market may crash, other dynamics are going to change, that growth rate may not be sustainable, so, all of those things, this is just simply a mechanism to mathematically show what the impact would be on the value of a property if you were able to achieve a certain growth rate. Okay? All right. Moving forward. Let's see. Okay, done that. Okay. Okay. So net future value. So this is kind of the opposite, if you will, of net present value in the sense of trying to figure out what is, once again, something going to be worth in the future given a set of assumptions. So, but the complicating fact of this one is where for a lot of the problems, once again, we've assumed a fixed dollar amount each year. What if that changes from one year to the next? How do you tackle that? And so your calculator does not have a net future value function, so you kind of have to do a workaround to sort of get there to that. So here's what we're basically saying. Let's kind of put this out on a timeline. So let's just say that we've got a 5-year holding period. All right, and we buy something for $100,000 here at time period 0, and our interest rate or holding period sort of rate of return that we want to achieve is somewhere maybe, let's say, around 5%. But what we want to calculate is what the value is going to be here, which would ordinarily just be future value. But the complicating factor is that we're going to have different cash flows potentially each year. So we could have, let's say in this first year, $10,000, the second year, $15,000, the next year, $5,000, the next year, $8,000, and the final year, let's say 12,000. Okay? Does everybody understand the setup? Okay? So it's just like the previous sort of problem, except here we're sort of looking forward to looking at what the future value of the property would be given that set of cash flows. So the way in which that we're going to have to do this is as follows. One payment per year. Okay. Clear everything out. And then we're going to put in 100,000 as a negative cash flow that's occurring here at time period 0. 10,000 as a cash flow. 15,000 as a cash flow. 5,000. 8,000 and 12,000. Okay, then we're going to put in 5% as our interest rate, and then we're going to solve for net present value. Okay, start there. And then I'll explain the logic of what we're doing.
I got 56,567.
Well, I was double checking mine just to make sure that.
Yeah, I got 56,567 too.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yep.
Me too.
That's why I stopped and was looking at it again because I put something in wrong. Okay, so it's 56, 567, 63. Okay, so this in essence represents what the net present value is, but let's do this. So we've got, in terms of income, 10,000. Oops.
It's 50,000.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and write it out just in case. Yep, 50,000. Okay, so think of it like this. We have spent 100,000 and we have only gotten half of our money back. Yes? Everybody see that? We spent $100,000 up here. We've only gotten half of our money back, and we've applied this 5% discount. And so what we're getting is a negative $56,000. So the way to look at that is, in essence, we're getting basically, we've got a loss, really, the best way to look at this, a loss of $56,000, taking into account the time value of money at 5% over that 5-year period. Okay? Is everybody with me on that conceptually? Yes or no? Okay? Because if we spent 100,000, we're only getting 50 of that back, then we're basically saying that's going to be partially discounted, and the reality is we're losing more than that. Okay? Now, we need to do is, let's see if I can find some space here, because I don't want to erase everything.
Why is the discount more than the income?
What?
The 56 is more than 50.
Yep, because you're actually losing more than 50. You're losing an additional $6,000 because of the time value of money.
Oh.
Okay? So now, to get the net future value of what we're really trying to achieve, if we want to get a 5% rate of return, what we've got to do is as follows. Clear everything out. Then, what we're going to do is we're going to put in 56,567.63 negative present value, 5%, 5 years, solve for future value.
$72,196.90.
Okay, hold 1 second. Okay, 72,196.22. Okay, so here's what we're saying. In order to give us the net future value that satisfies this 5% sort of expected rate of return, we would have to sell the property up here at the end of 5 years for $72,196.22. Does that make sense? Okay, another way of just thinking about it is if after we had put in all of this information about the net present value calculation, we could go in and in essence, well, we'd have to modify a couple of things, but basically what we could do is for this 5th year of income, we could add 72,196.22 to that, and what we should get then would be a net present value of 0, meaning we have met precisely what our required rate of return is. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. I think, let me double check. Anything I'm missing here?
So, add 72,002.
Yeah, if you were to rework the problem and you were to put the 72,000 as your 5th year cash flow along with the 12,000, and then resolve for net present, basically re-put it in everything, at least this portion of it. And let me explain for 1 second what's happening here. Think about it like this. This 72,000 and the 12,000 that you're receiving in year 5 are happening simultaneously. Okay? So that at the end of year 5, you are receiving your final payment of rent, or whatever you want to call it, lease payment, of $12,000. Simultaneously with receiving that, you are also receiving the sale price or the reversion value of the property of $72,000. Does that make sense? That's why you're putting them in here at the same time. If you simply add in the $72,000 as an additional cash flow, it will throw off your answer simply because that would be making the assumption that the $72,000 is really occurring here at year 6. We've got to make sure that's occurring year 5. And we're going to be doing other problems that are going to kind of get into that and explain more of that in detail. Right now, as long as you can sort of follow through these steps, you're going to be good. Okay?
So you're basically saying if you're selling it for less than what you bought it, you're still making a 5%
Correct.
return.
That's an excellent way to look at it. Okay? Because, and the reason you're able to sell it for less is because you're getting all of this income in between.
Yeah, but you're not doing any operating expenses here.
Well, we're sort of making the assumption that those are sort of embedded here. These are the cash flows, okay? So you're kind of making the assumption that it's lease payments minus expenses, okay? All right, good insight, all right? Anybody else? Okay. All right, I'm looking back over, let me just see for your 10 questions, if I missed anything.
If we're comfortable with everything that we did in class today, like the calculations, do you think that we would be ready to take the quiz?
Absolutely, and that's normally how it works. Is that literally, you know, come 11:15, whenever the quiz opens, you can start it, and you've got 45 minutes to do it.
Okay, I got a quick question. Maybe I might be a little off here, a little bit advanced. The 72,000 plus the 12,000, if you were to sell it, and you're saying that if we would have sold it for 72,000 plus the 12,000, that would just be only the cash flow we would make at the time that we sold it. But say, for instance, we sold it for above the 100,000 plus the 12, the 72.
Right. Then you would make higher than that 5% required rate of return.
And that would become our new rate of return.
Correct.
It was just your goal, so now you have a number that you know what you have to reach.
This is the goal. This is sort of the hurdle rate. The 5% is the floor of you've got to make that in order to keep yourself reasonably happy. But you're going to be super happy if you could get, let's say, 10 or 15%.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good questions. Okay, we have, it's 11:05, so technically 10 minutes before the quiz opens officially. So questions, other things you want to ask, we're afraid to ask. Now we've got a few minutes we can kind of relax.
So let me ask a question. I'm sorry. I want to ask a question. The only way this works is that you have to reinvest those cash flows, correct?
What?
That you're receiving in each year in order to recognize a positive gain.
You are receiving these cash flows. It's not so much that you're reinvesting them as much as it is you are receiving them and keeping them for yourself.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a kind of like a housekeeping type of question. Are all of our classes going to end at 11:15, or are they normally going to end at 12? Is it just today?
Well, no. That's a good question. Normally, I try to do the quizzes, obviously in a normal semester, during the class session. And so today I thought I'd give you a little bit more time to do the quizzes than normal. So today I'm giving you 45 minutes, and then probably future quizzes will be more like 30 minutes. Okay?
I have a question for you personally. So if you were to invest in a property, would you typically, let's say it was like a flip, would you typically flip it and hold on to it and rent it out? Or would you personally like flip it and sell it immediately for that rate of return?
So me personally, I hate property management. Absolutely hate it. I am not good with people, okay? And so my, sort of approach has traditionally been buy something, renovate it, get it leased out, and then sell it. I have tried being, and I still am a landlord on some properties, but I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Because I don't like being, woken up in the middle of the night with a call of, oh, my roof is leaking, oh, my toilet's overflowing, oh, I'm gonna, can't pay the rent this month, or oh, this, that, or the other thing. So that sort of stuff drives me nuts. So that being said, yeah, I'm typically the kind of person who's much more impatient and wants to buy something, fix it, capitalize the value out of that renovation, and move on.
So from an investment standpoint, the profits aren't so different because you can charge the rent, but you're still paying it off, or you can sell it immediately. So it's not necessarily like a profit standpoint, it's more of just like a personal preference.
Yeah, but also it may actually be that you're able to capitalize a lot of the value in that flip by virtue of raising the rents, having done whatever renovations you need to do. I mean, I'm a big commercial property kind of guy, and so for me, the real value play is typically, it's the whole buy low, sell high, but based on hopefully whenever you do buy it low, that you are being very cognizant of what value you can create, how much you can increase the rents, so that you hopefully are able to get a reasonable rate of return. You know, one of the things that is problematic in a market like we have here in South Florida, which I absolutely positively hate, because it is so overpriced, it is so picked clean of any deals that are of substantive nature, that you're competing with a lot of really smart, savvy investors, and so it makes it really difficult to find property here within this kind of a market and be able to do a flip, or for that matter, hold it long term and really make a substantive rate of return, unless you're able to find some sort of weird little specialty niche market that, you know, could be overlooked by a lot of people. The kind of markets that I love are ones typically in smaller towns, like in Texas, where I bought a bunch of stuff, still own a bunch of stuff there. And for those properties, for me, it's a lot easier because I'm not really competing with a lot of folks to find those deals. And so, you know, stumbling across a deal for whatever reason, I'm gonna maybe be the only player in the market even looking at it. Whereas, you know, here, every deal that I might be interested in, there's probably 15, 20, maybe 100 people looking at that exact same deal at the same time. So that's where, you know, and that's just me personally. And I'm not saying that that strategy should apply to anyone else other than me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've just been looking personally lately, just for fun, kind of, at the market, and it's like things are selling within days. Like they're being posted and they're under contract within 5 days.
Yeah, and it's nuts because people are overpaying for what they're really getting.
Right.
You know,
This market, South Florida real estate flip market and investment market, it's not about, it's more about numbers, how many you could do in a short period of time. So the bigger players will do the smaller margins because they can do 5 or 6 at a time, compared to you that's trying to get a larger margin of rate of return equal to what you want.
I mean, I won't even look at a deal unless I think I can get 30 or 40%, you know, rate of return on it. You know, and down here, people are you know, accepting, you know, 5%, you know, rates of return on properties, and it's absurd.
Okay.
Because you're dealing against a machine.
No, I get it. That's what I'm saying. That it's a whole different kind of mechanism. You've got a much more efficient, saturated market here that just makes, you know, deals just very, very difficult to find and to execute. Okay. All right. Any other questions before? I think we've got like 4 minutes. So if you want to start the quiz here in 4 minutes, you're welcome to. If not, obviously, once again, just to make sure everyone is 100% clear, because I know some people joined us a few minutes late, you have until Monday of this week, 2 days from now, okay, until 11 p.m. to start the quiz, and then it would be due at 11:45 p.m. on Monday. So anytime between now, 11:15 a.m. today, and 11 p.m. on Monday, you can start the quiz. Once you start the quiz, you can't stop the quiz, okay? And there's 10 questions. They're all 100% computations, just like the ones we did today, okay? And so, yeah, they're gonna have different numbers. In a couple of cases, slightly different wording. Pay attention to the whole thing of annual versus monthly, you know, so that you don't get yourself screwed up. Before you answer any of the questions, first question should always be monthly versus annual, and then, you know, doing whatever calculation that you're being asked to do. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to do a quick little timeline for each one to make sure that you're visualizing what's actually taking place. But think about it like this. There are 10 questions, so you've got 4.5 minutes per question. So you can't get bogged down and try to learn everything or relearn everything that we just went over. You've got to basically have absorbed it and then be able to use your notes to help kind of focus you maybe a little bit. Okay? All right? Any other final? Go ahead.
I have a question. I want to review this. So where am I going to find this class?
You go back on Canvas, and sometime today, 2 videos will be posted. One will be of the Zoom session. The other will be a video that I'm doing on a regular camera that I'll be uploading to YouTube, and I'll send everybody a link to that as well. That one may actually be the better one to use.
Okay.
I don't know, you can kind of look at them side by side and see which one you think is best. But yeah, they'll both be uploaded. As soon as I leave the classroom today, that's what I'm gonna go do, is upload the videos.
Okay, great. And one other question, next week, we're going to do in person, or if we want to.
Yes.
Is there a limit on students that can
Okay,
go?
so
We have to give you
there are about 26 of you enrolled in this class. We have room capacity for social distancing for 16 people, okay? Now, most of you have, I think, actually it works out, about 11 of you signed up for purely online. The other 16 of you said you were potentially interested in face-to-face. So based on the show of hands I saw earlier and what I've kind of received from most people, it says that we're going to have more than enough space to accommodate everybody. You will have to wear a face mask during class, as will I. But outside of that, it shouldn't be, that different than any other sort of situation. There's only probably 3 or 4 classes in the whole building that are going on. So this is the one day a week where you're going to not be bombarded with a bunch of other people. Okay. So.
Professor?
Yeah.
Last question. If you do make it to class, do you have to take the quiz right there and then, or could you take the online option?
No, you can still do the online option.
All right.
Yeah, because I'm going to administer the quizzes through the whole semester online. So what you can do is you can just stay in the room, open your computer, and do the quiz online there. Or wait and do it later.
Okay.
Okay? Anybody else?
Professor, can you stay afterwards so I could just do a revision on one of the problems that I seem to figure out where I messed up?
Okay. All right. All the rest of you, I guess we'll see you next week. And if you do have issues with the quiz or whatever, let me know. Now, if there's a rounding error or something like that, you get it wrong, I will be looking at that after the submissions come in. Because the way that I set the quiz up, it is precise to a penny, okay? And it's possible that if you're more or less than a penny off, it might mark it wrong, but trust me, I will go back and fix that, okay? All right. We'll see the rest of you next week.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll stay on just to, why not?
Working?
All right, looks like people are signing off, little by little.
You mind if I stay on, or am I at the same question?
Okay, sure. I'm assuming that these are just questions about something we did, so.
So I got all the calculations right. The one that I just seems to be getting the wrong answer for is the example that you did for the present value of annuity. My answer is by hundreds of $1,000s off, so I don't know if I'm missing a key or there was some stuff that maybe I was writing in